Explain like I'm 5. Why is hydrogen not feasible yet for heating or driving? What is actually the simplest answer why hydrogen is not feasible yet for a replacement of our usual ways to heat buildings or drive cars? I heard that hydrogen makes sense for larger vehicles that have to drive for a lot of miles, but smaller ones are not really in development outside of Toyota's experiments. Is there already a way to when it could get feasible? Today there is no large-scale carbon emission-free production of hydrogen, so-called green hydrogen. There is just blue hydrogen, which comes ultimately from oil and needs to be coupled with undeveloped or unproven carbon capture methods to be environmentally friendly. This explains the lack of interest in going down that path from everyone except oil. If they were serious and not just using the prospect to confuse people, they would do it. Hydrogen is explosive in any concentration with air. Hydrogen is very hard to store because it leaks out of most things. Hydrogen takes up a huge amount of space because you either need to make it liquid, which only happens if you cool it to 253 degrees Celsius, or store it as gas at extreme pressures, which need massively strong tanks. Hydrogen is incredibly hard to store. Since it's such a tiny molecule, it easily leaks out of pressurized tanks. Cryogenic storage is super energy intensive. Metal hydrides are super heavy. Hydrogen is the leakest stuff in world. Designing foolproof leak-proof connectors for hydrogen in a consumer environment would be challenging to say the least. It's energy intensive to produce, and very difficult to store and ship safely. Hydrogen is literally the smallest molecule possible. As a gas, it leaks readily through the kind of containers and seals that can contain other gases. And it takes either enormous pressure or extremely low temperatures to keep it in a liquid state. Hydrogen gas is also extremely combustible when it mixes with air. At least the Hindenburg was a hydrogen fire. So there are some significant engineering challenges to be overcome before large-scale distribution becomes feasible. In some places like the Netherlands, to a limited degree it's already a reality, and automotive companies have H2 engine prototypes. But they won't roll them out until monitoring and safety capabilities are improved. It's just not demonstrated to be as economically or ecologically better than your good old fossil engines. Natural gas comes out of the ground along with oil. It is very cheap. Hydrogen needs to be made with power, and therefore costs a lot more to get, although burning hydrogen just makes heat and water. Hydrogen is just an EV with extra steps, where an EV converts electricity into movement at an efficiency of 70–90. The hydrogen car needs electrolysis, compression and refrigeration, transport and filling, to convert 25–35 of that power into movement. The worst part about hydrogen is it's a horribly powerful greenhouse gas, and it leaks everywhere. It's also a chicken versus egg thing. There isn't much infrastructure for delivering hydrogen, and no one wants to invest in a delivery method because there's little hydrogen, because there's little infrastructure, because there's little hydrogen, and round. Purely the cost, we can make hydrogen pretty easily and cheaply, but it uses natural gas to do it, so it is sort of pointless. The holy grail is green hydrogen made using the electrolysis process, splitting water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The technology is still being worked on, as it isn't reliable and too expensive at the moment. Also, it is energy intensive, so it won't be viable unless you are producing tons of excess solar or wind energy. Then you could store all the excess as fuel. The cheaper solar gets, the cheaper hydrogen will get. Germany has about 100 hydrogen filling stations and counting. There are a dozen in Britain. The US lags behind every progressive solution. Again, and again, and again. Many of these reasons for not using hydrogen as a fuel source are the same crappy propaganda. Talking points that claim that solar and wind are not viable alternatives. 8 out of 10 doctors recommend Camel cigarettes. Hydrogen explodes. Like big. People are justifiably hesitant to put a giant hydrogen bomb into every vehicle on the road and into every home. People have mentioned the storage problem. But a part is that hydride has been illegal to sell because it could theoretically be used to make homemade. There was a guy who made his own hydrogen car with it a while back. But he got around the hydride by making his own. With a particle accelerator he had to build at home. If you Google Bob Lazar, that is the guy. It's take energy to get hydrogen. So it's really just a form of energy storage that is not very dense. There are applications for it. But a typical battery has higher energy density. Hydrocarbons have a very high energy density. And thus less energy going into extraction and processing is less than the output. It leaks through goddamn everything. It makes conventional gas storage methods brittle by leaking through the crystal lattice of metals. Not something you want from your high-pressure gas cylinder. All the other problems fall over with economy of scale if you solve storage. I've actually been working in Landshut in Germany this week, and a colleague was telling me about a gas station we passed, as it's one of very few places that has hydrogen pumps. I was more interested in the fact that hydrogen in German is Wasserstoff. Water stuff. But it clearly is possible. I think with a lot of these things it comes down to how much RD is allocated to it. I'm sure it could be workable if the intent was there. Just about the only attractive thing about hydrogen is you can make it with electricity, and it makes water when used as a fuel. The cheaper methods of making hydrogen that are more commercially viable just end up being using fossil fuels in some way or another, either fossil fuel power or a byproduct. The storage of it is difficult since you need expensive pressurized tanks. The fuel itself is highly dangerous as it's much more flammable than gasoline and easily leaks. It takes a lot of energy to make hydrogen. It takes a lot of energy to transport and store it. Spending on other parts of the clean economy is vastly more energy efficient for now. As a gas safety engineer, hydrogen molecules are super small, even for being molecules, and are notoriously difficult to keep inside a pressure vessel. The flammable range of H2 is 4 volume to about 77 volume. Propane, on the other hand, is only flammable in mixes between 1.7 volume and 5 volume. This means the risk for a perfect mix of air, allowing an explosion, is much larger for H2. Hydrogen also requires less energy, smaller spark to ignite. The weight of the containers needed to store compressed hydrogen is so heavy that it really limits what you can push with its power. Also, it's insanely dangerous, despite having way greater energy density than hydrogen gas. Gasoline won't make a massive explosion unless you've taken great pains to aerosolize it first. But 100 of your hydrogen will go boom if you give it the opportunity. Hydrogen is a way to store energy. The biggest problem is that you only get back 25 of the energy you store in it. So you would need nearly 3-4x as many windmills and/or solar panels to power a fleet of hydrogen trucks as you need to power a fleet using batteries. and that would roughly correspond to about 4x the cost per mile.